A single TV print of a 70s sci-fi film once deleted the entire original ending, and most viewers didn't even know. What else did broadcasters slice out of your favorite retro futures? Here's the truth. In the 1970s and early 80s, many sci-fi releases were heavily re-edited for television, with jump cuts, alternate takes, and pan and scan crops that could hide up to a third of the frame. Today, uncut restorations are finally here. Let's count 15 censored classics you can watch as intended. No blurs, no trims, no missing finales. 1. THX 1138, 1971. George Lucas's feature debut isn't lasers and starships. It's a sterile, medicated future where intimacy is illegal and workers live by sedative schedules. Network and syndicated TV prints often dialed back the film's most unsettling textures: the forced drugging, the cold medical nudity, and the prolonged electrobaton punishments. Pan and scan also blunted the minimalism. A movie built on negative space became flat close-ups and awkward reframes. The uncut version restores the rhythm of oppression, lingering clinical procedures, the slow dread of surveillance, and the full audio sting of electronic punishment. Hidden gem. Lucas and editor Walter Murch use sound design as plot. PA mantras and machine hums are scripted cues, not wallpaper. The infamous White Void chase was shot in an unfinished BART tunnel. TV cropped it so tight that the geography vanished. Watch the proper framing, and the chase finally feels like a man sprinting inside an infinite machine. One more detail fans miss. The consumer prayer booth is satire, not set dressing. TV cuts often jump past the "buy more now, be happy" payoff. The uncut pacing makes the ending hit harder. Freedom isn't fireworks. It's a fragile horizon you have to earn breath by breath. 2. The Brood, 1979. David Cronenberg turns a custody battle into cellular warfare. Nola, Samantha Egger, undergoes psychoplasmics, a therapy that externalizes rage into flesh, specifically murderous broodlings born from her body. Broadcast versions regularly trimmed the mallet attack, the classroom murder aftermath, and the shocking birth scene, replacing them with reaction shots and audio dips. The uncut film restores the pathology. Resentment becomes anatomy, and family court turns into a morgue. Craft notes: the brood suits were scaled for child performers. TV crops made them look like rubber dolls, but in scope, they're child-sized monsters. That's the point. Cronenberg's structure is investigative, not slasher. Lose the graphic beats and you lose the evidence that links psyche to lesion. Hidden detail: Howard Shore's first feature score is already doing his later trick. Ritual strings that make gore feel sacred and inevitable. The final reveal, Nola's external womb, is the thesis shot that TV feared, a grotesque maternal shrine to weaponized emotion. Without it, the movie becomes Weird Murders. With it, you understand why Cronenberg calls The Brood his Kramer versus Kramer with monsters. The uncut ending scars on purpose. It's a warning label for rage we pretend is private. 3. Phase Wavre, 1974. Saul Bass, legendary title designer, directed a cerebral apocalypse where hyper-intelligent ants restructure nature using math. TV's biggest sin wasn't gore. It was removal of the cosmic finale in many circulating prints, leaving a tidy ending instead of Bass's trip sequence that reframes humanity as raw substrate. Broadcasts also shortened uncomfortable animal footage and time-lapse inserts, blunting the planetary lab experiment feel. The uncut, restored version reinstates the full geometric ascension, cathedral-like ant mounds, sun disk alignments, and the final "we have been redesigned" implication. Production: Nugget. The macro work isn't stock. Ken Middleham shot bespoke ant choreography with lighting ratios that turn insects into architects. TV pan and scan reduce those frames to bug close-ups. In widescreen, they're blueprints. Hidden fact: the two scientists' bunker was lit like a brain hemisphere, warm versus cold, mirroring their clashing philosophies. With the intended ending, Phase 4 stops being ants attack and becomes cosmic body horror, intelligence as infection. That's why the uncut cut matters. It restores the film's big swing, the idea that evolution can feel like colonization from below. 4. The Fury, 1978. Brian De Palma takes the scanner's trick and laces it with parental betrayal. Government black ops weaponize psychics. The bill comes due in red chunks. TV prints famously trimmed the carousel shootout, the kiddie pool abduction aftermath, and the operatic final explosion. A multi-angle body detonation that's both gag and Greek tragedy. The uncut version restores De Palma's ballet of cause and effect. Long takes set you up, split diopter shots, split loyalties, and then squibs, air mortars, and reverse photography rip the world open. Music cue to notice. John Williams writes a lush, almost romantic theme, so the gore feels like grand betrayal, not shock for shock's sake. Hidden craft. Some impact shots were designed to be read in slow motion. TV's frame trims and audio dips kill their timing. De Palma stages violence as emotional punctuation. End of sentence, period. Remove it, and characters seem to melt off screen. The uncut ending isn't just money shot mayhem. It's a moral verdict delivered at 200 frames per second. You see what power does to bodies and to love. 5. The Incredible Melting Man, 1977. A returning astronaut is irradiated and liquefies over 90 minutes, leaving viscous trails and victims. Local stations loved the title, not the ooze, so they trimmed face slides, ear drips, and a standout set piece with a nurse cornered in a steam room. The uncut film is a tour of makeup effects escalation by Rick Baker, protege Greg Canham. Layered gelatin. Appliances, heated glycerin, and collapsing facial structures timed to blinks. Watch for progress markers. Earlier scenes use subtle peel lines, later ones go full waxworks. Hidden gem, the quarry finale stages the body as public hazard, with pieces sloughing into industrial runoff. TV often cut away before the street sweeper tag that sells the nihilism. This isn't high philosophy. It's a sticky fable about Cold War heroism rotting on contact with reality. The uncut version restores the key sensation. Time equals decay. Without the icky beats, you're left with a guy in bandages. With them, you get a morbid clock that won't stop until nothing human remains. 6. Mad Max, 1979. George Miller's original is a low-budget blast of asphalt and consequence. U.S. television often softened the road carnage, bloodier crash aftermaths, the off-screen implications of burning, and the grim saw or burn choice in the climax. Some early American releases even used a dub that flattened accents and blunted menace. The uncut and correctly mixed version restores Miller's editorial language. Impact doesn't end at the crash. It reverberates in sound, bruises, and time. Shot guerrilla style with friends as cops and stolen moments on highways, the film sells a society drifting from law to vengeance. Listen for Brian May's score, brassy alarms that TV often dipped under dialogue. Hidden craft, the leg trap shot is a miracle of framing. Pan and scan turned it into nonsense, pushing stations to cut it entirely. In full frame, Max's revenge is moral geometry. You feel the distance between choice and pain, trimmed to the legal limit, but unmistakably cruel. Uncut, Mad Max isn't an action reel. It's a prophecy about how civilizations die one compromise at a time. And even the Stepford Wives, 1975. No gore, no monsters. Just a Connecticut suburb where wives become compliant replacements. So, why did TV tinker? Network censors often trimmed nudity-adjacent moments and tightened creepy pauses, worried that the sexual dread and gender politics were too adult for the hour. Ironically, that pace is the weapon, long, uncanny beats where humanity seems almost present. The uncut film lets those silences breathe until they suffocate. Production. Nugget director Brian Forbes fought for warm lighting and domestic scenes, so the horror would bloom from comfort, not shadow. Hidden gem. Paula Prentice's free-spirited Bobby is the film's metronome. When she breaks, the audience does too. TV cuts often de-emphasize that turn, and the story felt like a twist instead of a process. In proper form, Stepford isn't satire, it's surgery, quietly removing will, hobby, and humor until only a smile remains. That's why the uncut version lands with modern audiences. Once you restore the boring moments, you finally feel the murder of personality. 8. Coma, 1978. Michael Crichton directs a procedural about healthy patients who slip into coma during routine surgery, then vanish into a suspicious facility. TV runs often minimize clinical nudity, corpse staging, and the suspension hall reveal. Rows of bodies floating on wires in a cathedral of vents. The uncut version restores the industrial awe and the time it takes to absorb it. Production note: the suspension set is not matte trickery. It's a full build with forced perspective. Cropping and contrast shifts on TV turned it into a flat grid and invited snips. Hidden craft. Crichton times scares to procedure steps. An anesthetic drip, a switch flip, a door hiss. Remove a step and the payoff feels random. Genevieve Bujold's tenacity is the thread. One trimmed confrontation and her arc drops from whistleblower to curious doctor. In proper cut, Coma plays like a horror film that refuses to raise its voice. The terror is systems level, the hospital as corporation, and the uncut timing lets that terror click. 9. The Crazies, 1973. George A. Romero trades zombies for a military-made pathogen called Trixie, but keeps his obsession: how authorities fail under pressure. Local stations often cut needle insertions, autopsy glimpses, and citizen-on-soldier brutality, plus trimmed bleak codas to make ad breaks friendlier. The uncut version restores Romero's thesis: panic is contagious, and uniforms don't grant wisdom. Production nugget: Romero shot with documentary instincts, zoom lenses, available light, and real Pennsylvania towns, so gore pops like news footage. TV's contrast and color shifts made it look cheaper, prompting more edits. In proper grading, it feels alarmingly present. Hidden gem: the priest on fire, stumbling through authority lines, is staged as moral indictment. TV often jumped before the wide that sells the moment. Romero's cut is less about shock than policy horror, roadblocks, bad memos, and men with guns who think that's the same as control. Uncut, The Crazies feels like a rehearsal for crises we've actually lived. 10. Prophecy, 1979. A pulp parable. Industrial mercury poisoning mutates wildlife around a Maine paper mill, birthing a deformed bear and a wave of tragedies. TV often excised the sleeping bag kill, a notorious gag where a camper explodes into feathers, trimmed attacks on children, and cut up close views of skin lesions and malformed cubs. The uncut version restores the film's nasty environmental throughline. Violence isn't random, it's the forest giving feedback. Production note: the creature suit was reworked mid-shoot. Night lighting and slime were used to hide seams. TV's brightness pushes often betrayed the rubber and invited edits to save face. Hidden gem: composer Leonard Rosenman's angular brass isn't action music. It's toxic fanfare, cueing that the villain is bioaccumulation. With all beats in place, Prophecy stops being a camp punchline and reads as late 70s rage. When a system poisons the poor first, the monsters arrive last. 11. It's Alive, 1974. Larry Cohen's low-budget shocker about a killer newborn is more grief study than splatterfest, if you see it uncut. TV minimized delivery room carnage, the milkman attack aftermath, and special effects close-ups of the infant's claws and fangs. The uncut film keeps Bernard Herrmann's nursery rhyme motifs right up against violence, creating the intended whiplash. Parental love colliding with fear of one's own child. Production nugget: Rick Baker's creature pieces were designed to be glimpsed, not stared at. TV reframes often lingered on the wrong angle, making them look hokier and prompting further trims. Cohen shoots Los Angeles like a municipal maze: pharmacy basements, hospital corridors, cul-de-sacs, places TV edits compress into generic rooms. Hidden gem: the father's arc depends on seeing what he sees. When broadcasts cut key aftermaths, audiences misread him as hysterical instead of tragically lucid. Uncut, It's Alive plays like a primal scream about family, guilt, and blame, and it's much harder to laugh off. 12. The Terminal Man, 1974. Mike Hodges adapts Crichton's novel about a violent man implanted with a seizure-controlling computer that starts hijacking his behavior. TV trims focused on surgical detail and a chilling post-op relapse sequence, plus pacing cuts that undercut the film's clinical hypnosis. The uncut version is practically a manifesto on sterile dread. Long, wordless shots, architecture that dwarfs people, and electronics that sound almost compassionate right before they fail. Production. Nugget, the operating room material, used real equipment and consultants. That's why the procedures feel procedural, not montage. Hidden gem. The house with black geometric art becomes a feedback chamber. TV's contrast shifts erased some of that visual motif, making later violence feel motiveless. Hodges wants you trapped inside a human experiment run by men who love gadgets more than outcomes. Uncut, you finally hear the argument. Automation without ethics is horror in a lab coat. 13. The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1977. This version leans into medical fetish and colonial dread. A brilliant scientist reshapes animals into man-beasts and builds a plantation of obedience. TV packages regularly trimmed vivisection imagery, whip punishment, and painful prosthetic reveal shots, along with tightening the beast-on-human attack beats. The uncut film lets the makeup breathe. You see pores, sweat, and failure. The line between animal and man never quite holds, which is the point. Production. Nugget, the makeups needed constant regluing and heat. Close-ups were scheduled like stunts. TV crops made some creatures look like masks. In scope, they're unfinished beings. Hidden gem. The House of Pain isn't just a room name, it's the story engine. Cut too much of it and the revolt feels arbitrary. Uncut. This Moreau is a sermon delivered with a scalpel. Progress without consent is butchery. And empires always call it science. 14. Future World, 1976. Years before theme park androids became a franchise, Future World pushed the idea darker. Corporate conspirators replaced VIPs with biosynthetic doubles. TV toned down a surgical eye sequence, trimmed robot humanoid gore, and punched holes in the cloning reveal montage. The uncut version shores up the thriller spine. You need every invasive insert to believe the swap. Production note. Optical printer work sells the doubles. Pan and scan and contrast shifts made those comps look cheap, which ironically invited more cuts. Hidden gem. The Dream Game Chamber is both visual effects, showpiece, and character test. Broadcasts often shortened it, weakening the emotional reset before Act 3. In full, Future World reads like a paranoid memo about hospitality tech and surveillance capitalism. The uncut beats are the receipts showing how the con works. In 15. The Visitor, 1979. An Italian-American cosmic mashup where a sinister corporate cult wants a girl with telekinetic powers for an intergalactic plan. On US TV, scenes with bloodied bird attacks, Hall of Mirrors stabbings, and the rougher edges of the finale were clipped or scrambled. Result, a camp curio. The uncut, restored version reorders and clarifies connective tissue, making the story's theology, good versus a cosmic hawk demon, coherent enough to be hypnotic. Production. Nugget. The basketball arena set piece uses strobing light to hide effect seams. TV standards often demanded reduced flicker, dulling both impact and the edit rhythm. Hidden gem. Franco Michelidzi's score shifts from disco menace to liturgical awe. TV mixes ducted under dialogue, shrinking scale. In proper form, The Visitor becomes a sincere attempt at mythic sci-fi on a grindhouse budget. Beautiful, baffling, and suddenly alive when you see all the forbidden frames. Those are your 15 censored 70s sci-fi movies you can finally watch uncut for real. If you want, I'll stitch these into a full script with opening hook, mid-roll prompt, and end-screen chaining to your earlier TV wouldn't air video, plus on-screen lower thirds noting what broadcast cut versus what's restored.